Hello, thanks for tuning in. It's September 17th, 2025, and I'm Joe Simhart with another installment of Cults in the Alt Culture. Today I'd like to concentrate on a new book I read by this gentleman, Sean Prophet. He is now 51 years old. He was born in 1964, and he was born into the Church Universal and Triumphant, then called Summit Lighthouse, when he was born, that was founded by his parents. And it was the group, which I've mentioned before on my channel, that gave me the most trouble in terms of the theosophical milieu of sects and groups and cults that exist out there. I first learned about this group in 1978, but I encountered members of the group in 1975 when I first came to Santa Fe. I got interested in it after reading books and knowing local people, and went to 3 conferences from 1979 through 1980, attended by several thousand people. And I saw Sean when he was a kid at these conferences, running around the grounds and whatever, along with his then 3 other siblings, his sisters. When Sean was born into this group, his parents believed in past lives. They had fantastic past lives. You know, his father claimed to be Akhenaten, and the poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in a past life, and it goes on. And his mother was Queen Nefertiti and Catherine of Siena, Catherine the Great, and she also had the title of Mother of the Universe. So you could imagine that this kid was saddled with quite a huge burden of religious ideology and delusion in the end, as he found out. His parents claimed he was King Arthur in a past life, and that he was going to become the next leader, the next messenger, you know, to carry on this cult. By the time he was in his early 20s, he began to have a lot of doubts about this thing, because he saw from the inside what was going on, all the duplicity, the incredible manipulations of the followers by his parents, especially his mother. His father died in 1973, and his mother took the group over, and it grew exponentially, maybe anywhere from 10 to 25,000 members, depending how you count members, because there's layers of commitment. For instance, they had 700 dedicated staff members at their peak, which would be the core of the cult, and then maybe several thousand in teaching centers around the country. But I want to read you something here that he says as he was trying to break free of this whole thing in his early 20s. It's on page 375. He said, "I resisted rejecting God and the Marvel menagerie, like Marvel Comics, menagerie of ascended masters with every ounce of willpower I could muster. I stayed loyal to all the gods I knew until my formerly hated carnal mind." The carnal mind in the Church Universal and Triumphant cult and New Age groups is kind of like the idea that your higher self is connected to God, and it's linked to your heart. So your personal experience and you know, all your wonder and awe about the universe is linked to your heart, and the only thing in between your heart and God is your head, and your carnal mind is up here, and that's preventing you from really grasping and knowing God in a Gnostic sense. So he struggled with his carnal mind that he was indoctrinated with as being evil. But his carnal mind, he says, left me no choice. My nemesis became my savior. At first, the realization burned. Those stories had shielded me from uncertainty, given me a sense of purpose, and made me feel like my life was written into the fabric of the universe. But as my illusion shattered, so did their change. For the first time, I could see the cosmos for what it truly was. Not some divine stage with me at its center, but a vast expanse governed by rules which I could learn to understand. Without divine fear and cosmic drama, I found something I had not expected. Liberation. So he's liberated from the straitjacket of believing he was King Arthur and thousands of other strange ideas and rules. You know, for instance, he wasn't allowed to wear black or red, wear silver jewelry, as I mentioned before with this cult, think negative thoughts. You know, of course he rebelled as a kid, like most kids do in cults, but he always came back to that center because this is what he believed was the truth. He had no argument against it till later. So his book, My Cult, Your Cult, and the subtitle is How Cults Destroy Truth and Bolster Authoritarian Power, is a result of a hell of a lot of research, recovery, therapy. I have to really admire what he went through because I've gotten to know him. He interviewed me for one of the chapters in here on what constitutes exit counseling and deprogramming because of my history in that whole field. But I'd like to point to you two chapters which impressed me the most in this book. This one, Fascism and Thought Reform, he goes into a very sophisticated comparison between his cult, the Church Universal and Triumphant, and its right-wing, quasi-fascist orientation, and the current MAGA movement. There's a lot of connections here which he's able to draw from his personal experience, because, you know, once he saw this MAGA movement growing, he said, that was in my group, that was in my group, that was in my group, you know, and there's a whole list of these things that he recognized as being that fascist spiritual orientation that his group was and is. Not so much today, but it was really more active back in the day when his mother was still functional. She ended up getting Alzheimer's in the 1990s, and in the last 8 or 9 years of his life, her life, could not lead the group at all. So he makes these parallels, and they're quite clear. His group, the Church Universal and Triumphant, had roots. Many of its early members were in William Dudley Pelley's fascist Silver Shirts movement, or the Silver Legion. Pelley testified in court that he would do to the Jews what basically Hitler was doing, which was isolating them at the time and demeaning them. Pelley was in court in 1934 in the United States for fascist activities. The Holocaust hadn't happened yet, but the beginnings were there, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism. So the I Am cult that inspired the majority of what became the Church Universal and Triumphant, in fact, they claimed that the I Am cult leaders were ascended masters, borrows a lot from those fascist roots of the 1920s in the United States. So he goes into all of these points quite readily. For instance, the first point he covers is the cult of tradition and syncretism. In other words, you blend a lot of things together into one world religion, which is supposed to rule the world in the end, or at least the nation, if nothing else. His group had references to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a fake hoax document implicating that Jews want to run the world. That came out of Russia in the 19th century. They promoted it as true, most secretly, more or less, he says. Then the second thing is the rejection of modernism. We have an incredible rejection of modernism in the MAGA movement. Modernism as expressed in universities, in most liberal universities that want you to think for yourself and learn to compare and contrast ideas and improve how we look at things. Fundamentalism in Christian religion sees modernism as the enemy, as satanically inspired. So there's been that reaction. Distrust of intellectuals, again, that's a big part of this movement. There was a similar movement in his group. They didn't like critics, people that intellectually did hermeneutics and looked at eisegesis and exegesis and how their texts were put together, could easily dismantle some of their major books, as I did, like Climb the Highest Mountain, written by Mark and Elizabeth Prophet, is a mess when it comes to scholarship. But it's a Bible to the group. And then he says that no syncretistic faith can withstand analytical criticism. So when you syncretize everything into one belief system and expect everyone to believe it, it's called fascism. And this is something that Umberto Eco discussed, the great semiotician and scholar. He's the author who wrote The Name of the Rose and other great books like Foucault's Pendulum, which I love. The fear of difference, the idea that there can be diversity in society and we should respect people for differences in color, nationality, language, religion, or whatever. There's an innate fear that the other is going to steal something from you, or they're evil compared to you because you have the truth. He goes into individual or social frustration about the status quo, obsession with a plot, in other words, conspiracies. Enemies are simultaneously too strong or too weak, so you have to place the fear of God into your cult following about how powerful Satan is, and then also that any other ideology is too weak for us to follow. That's where he's going with that. Life is to be lived for struggle. And then fascism, as he says, is popular elitism. It's a populism which makes the wounded narcissism in us feel better because we're part of a group which is greater than the average hoi polloi going on out there. And if we believe in the group, we will rise, to power along with the leaders, which never happens. The leaders always retain most of the power, and the followers end up struggling to gain it throughout their lives. So the book is full of gems. There are some personal fixations that he has. For instance, he's an atheist, and he argues from that point of view, kind of a logical positivist idea, which not everybody can appreciate. But he does substantiate his arguments quite well. And I think the last chapter is well worth reading a couple of times because he goes into how he made peace in the end with his mother and his father, in a sense, forgiving what had happened. They might have been victims of their own inadequacies. His mother had epilepsy all her life. It affected her brain. She had fantasies, which goes along with the epileptic aura in people, and they can envision things, they can feel, they can write books at times, they can get manic. It's just a side effect of having that condition. And so who knows? If she didn't have the condition, she may have never believed in any of this, never met Mark Prophet or whatever. We don't know. But there is this reconciliation with his family. In the end, him and his sisters don't agree on everything, but none of them follow the religion that they grew up in. He had a step-sibling, Elizabeth Clare Prophet's fifth child. It was a boy, and that person, though I don't know a whole lot about him, he no longer supports the religion either, as far as I understand. So anyway, My Cult, Your Cult is a good read. Very intense in some places, very informative, very challenging, controversial in places, and I'd recommend you read it. You'll get an insight into the cult I was in, Church Universal and Triumphant, now called Summit Lighthouse. By the way, this is a coincidence. I put this on because I went for a walk this morning and it was chilly and I happened to put this sweater on. So the summit is with us even today, although there's been a denouement, and the group is no longer as powerful as it was when Elizabeth Clare Prophet, Sean's mother, was alive and functioning. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.